Okay, here we go. Awesome. All right. You can go for it, Matt, and welcome everybody in.
Welcome to Safety Always, Child Labor Practices. My name is Matt Roy. I'm with the Upper Midwest Film Office. Appreciate everybody joining us this evening. We've got a great panel discussion tonight around child labor practices on set. I would like to introduce our UMFO team. Sherry, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sherry Marshik, and I am the Executive Director of the Upper Midwest Film Office. Thrilled to have people here and watching later on, if you join us later on. This is an important discussion, and we hope to be able to continue these discussions moving forward about things that about making projects in Minnesota, well, and across the US. So last time we had some people from San Diego joining us. So thanks for being here.
Hi, and I'm Ricky McManus, and I am all things production for the Upper Midwest Film Office. Thrilled that you're joining us today. I think it's going to be a great panel. Get ready for questions at the end because I know you're all going to have a lot of them. Thanks for being here tonight.
And
Hi,
Carrie.
everybody. I am Carrie Bush, and I am the Program and Development Director for the Upper Midwest Film Office. And my background is working in the film industry as an assistant director for about 20 years. Very excited to have everybody here.
Thanks, Carrie. Again, I'm Matt Roy. I'm the project and educational coordinator for the Upper Midwest Film Office. I'm also a producer and actor, and whatever pays the bills some days. Yeah, I just want to start off by putting out a general disclaimer. The information provided today here is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Please consult a qualified attorney or state office for advice on any specific legal issues or concerns. Just have to get that out of the way. We are here for information, and we will provide as much information as we possibly can find around this topic and any other topics that may come up for you guys, but please, we are not the end all be all. So Carrie,
Definitely. So this is our third in a series of safety panels. We did one in May that was centered around just set safety and speaking up for yourself as a crew or cast member, and the different things that production and the AD department and other departments do to ensure safety on set. Then in July, we did one around intimacy coordination and mental health experts on set to help amongst those realms. And now we are doing one around child labor laws and safety on set. It's amazing how many times I'll get a panicked text or email saying, now what are the rules around minors on set? And that's part of the reason why we thought it was important to have this panel of people to talk about it from different perspectives. And we will be sending out a survey at the end that gives an opportunity for anybody on here to put down what they might want, what kind of a safety panel they'd like to see in the future. So we just really want to keep these conversations going so there's no questions when it comes to safety on set at all. So with that, I think we should introduce our panelists, Matt.
Yeah, I want to quickly just ask that if you have questions along the way, we're going to have a little Q&A at the end, but as we're going, if you have a question that pops up in regards to a topic that we're on at that moment, please just write the question down in the chat. We'll try to get to everybody's questions at the end. Carrie and I will be tracking the chat as we go, but please just keep yourselves muted as you're coming in, and just put your questions up in the chat. We'll get to those at the end. And yeah, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kathy Burns. She's the Director of Film and TV at the Chicago SAG-AFTRA office.
Hello, thanks, Matt. I am Kathy Byrne. I'm the Director of the Film and Television Department for SAG-AFTRA in Chicago. I've been doing this for 14 years, and prior to that, I was with the Chicago Film Office for 20 years. So that is my history.
Thank you, Kathy. And Lucy D.
Hi, I'm Lucci, and on this panel, I'm serving as a studio set teacher slash welfare worker. I've been in this industry on this side of the industry for the past, maybe 10, 12 years at this point. And my daughter came up in the industry also. So I've been very familiar with this for and she's turning 27 now. So I guess almost 27 years now.
Thanks, Lucy. John Steinhorst.
Yes, thank you, Matt. My name is John. I live in Minneapolis. I work here as a local producer, line producer, assistant director, and director. Through the commercial industry here and the film industry here, I've worked on many projects that have employed swarms of children, which is always a challenge. And until you do it, you don't know what it's about. So I don't know, I've been working here since 2012. Prior to that was in Chicago, about 20 years of film industry experience.
Thank you, John. All right, well, I am just going to get right into some questions here. Kathy, I'd like to, what's that?
Betty as well.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Betty, yes.
No worries. I am the mother of a wonderful actress. I have been her mom for 17 years, but she has had a love for this industry since she was 2. And I have had to learn how to navigate this world in a way to keep her safe, protect her, and also allow her to be able to do what she loves in the most safest environment. So yes, I'm excited to talk to everyone about what my experience is like and how I advocate for my child.
Thanks, Betty, so much. All right. Kathy, I'm going to ask you a few questions here, just to kickstart it with some of the union talks. How do you support projects that are working with minors?
So SAG-AFTRA has, so for those of you who don't know, SAG-AFTRA is an actors union. So let's start with that. But SAG-AFTRA has negotiated provisions in all of our contracts that pertain to the treatment and safety of minors on sets. So I'm going to put in our chat, I will put the link for both the film and television contract as well as the commercial contract. So you can find those provisions that pertain to each of those contracts so that you have that if you're interested in delving a little deeper. In the commercial contract, minor provisions are covered under Section AA, and in the TV theatrical contract, they are covered under the general provisions, Section 50. You'll be able to find everything you ever wanted to know about how to deal with minors on a set and what that treatment should look like. So both of those links are in the chat. But we cover everything in those contracts, from how auditions can be scheduled. It's okay for a child to miss school for work, but it's not okay for them to miss school to audition. So we have a provision that says that children who audition need to audition outside of their regular school hours. Minors can work on set for a specific number of hours based on the minor's age. Minors who are missing school need to receive tutoring on set under specific circumstances. Education, obviously, most important. In the film and television contract, you will also see that guardians who are on location with their child should have their expenses covered. Travel, accommodations, per diem, because if the parent is out of pocket, chances are they won't show up, and the parent needs to show up to be with their child. So that's kind of what the contract covers, different rules and regs that need to be followed when working with children.
And Kathy, how do you ensure compliance with working hours, break times, rest periods for child actors? What kind of documents and departments do you generally work with?
So documents on set are timesheets that children, minors, everybody signs in and out every day. That includes their lunch hour. There's also documentation that is filled out covering their schooling hours as part of their production report. So those are all documented by production.
And is that information coming to you from the production office, from ADs?
Yeah, the
Good.
production turns that information in to SAG-AFTRA as part of their paperwork.
And what specific child labor guidelines must we follow on the set for SAG-AFTRA?
So in those contracts, in the provisions, it's going to tell you the different things that have to be followed. Safety being obviously the most important for everybody on set, but specifically for minors. It's important to follow the provisions in our contracts for a union production, but even for a non-union production, both a union and non-union production need to follow state laws as well. And whenever there's a provision where SAG-AFTRA contract conflicts with a state law, the more protective provision prevails. As I mentioned before, the most important concept for both SAG-AFTRA and the state, any state, is the safety of minors in sets. And this includes kids not ever being alone. Parent is always needed and needs to be present in the hair and makeup trailer, in wardrobe, at auditions, on set. A parent must always be within earshot and eye shot of that child. I always tell parents that it's exciting that your child is on a film set or on a commercial set, but at the end of the day, you are still the parent and you have every right to be there and to protect your child in all circumstances. So yeah.
And I think it's kind of important to bring up the fact that, even though a lot of us have worked on non-union projects, it's a good standard of practice to know what the rules and regulations are around not just the state, but also for union productions. Just knowing those rules and applying that on your non-union shoot, it should be just a general standard of practice. And I think that's, one of the reasons that we're doing a lot of these panels discussions are to say, you might be working on a non-union shoot, but here's how you should be doing it. So. Thank you, Kathy. And Carrie, I'm gonna hand it over to you for a minute.
Yep. So that's great information, and there is information like Kathy said for SAG-AFTRA in the chat, and then we've also put in some stuff for the state of Minnesota for those of you that are interested. I'm gonna ask some questions to Betty. So as a mom, you obviously have a lot of experience working with production and advocating for your child. can you just talk about the role of the parent or guardian during the child actor's workday and how involved you are when you step in or not or whatever?
Absolutely, yeah. So my job and how I see it is to absolutely make sure Danielle feels safe. So, and when I say that, I mean psychologically, physically, safe. It's important to me and it is important to her in order for her to continue to love what she does. Because the minute that that's not okay in terms of safety, then I feel like I have to step in. So essentially making sure that all her needs are met and that all of the laws are being followed. And one of the things that I like to do from the beginning is kind of set that relationship between production and myself and the expectations I have in terms of my child and the things that I know are supposed to happen. I think in the past, lack of knowledge has played a huge part in some of the things that I've witnessed, but the term knowledge is power is very real. So knowing when they're supposed to take breaks and establishing that to begin with production, that, you know, my child absolutely will need the break. When do we have them set in place in terms of that? And that includes lunch, not just regular breaks, but lunchtime. When is that scheduled? And in terms of physical, I heard Kathy mention what is this, makeup, hair, also dressing. So sometimes you're on location, which means you're not on set. You may be at a house or you might be at a restaurant, having that designated space for them to be able to change where the child is completely comfortable and not in front of others, even up to being mic'd, making sure that you're present. And she also mentioned that you have to be within eye shot, earshot. Eye shot doesn't necessarily mean in front of your child, but in the event that you can't be right in front, a monitor is supposed to be provided where you can see them at all times. So I'm also one who will ask where, if, you know, outside of being able to see her with my naked eyes, where can I sit and where's the monitor set up so I can hear and see what's going on. Like I said in the beginning, I like to establish those things to begin with. And then in terms of her education, which is extremely important to me and her, I also let production know that to begin with. Usually with the first AD, I want to know if I can meet with the set teacher or studio teacher, whichever they have, to establish what it looks like for her, how many hours will be given, if they plan on banking time, when that will happen, and what it looks like. From beginning to end, ask all of the necessary questions so they know I know what's going on. And two, so we can establish some type of plan for Danielle, my daughter, and honestly, any other child on set. And I do try my best to have good communication with the parents on set as well, because when one goes, if we all go, then there's a good chance that, you know, production is going to follow suit and you won't have a battle on your hand, versus you being the only one stepping up and looking like, you know, you're causing trouble, which I don't have a problem with looking like that. Like I said, it's about her safety. And when that's an issue, I absolutely will speak up.
Mm-hmm. And so you obviously have a lot of experience and you've learned by having that experience, right? Like to be more of an advocate and to speak up and to not feel like you're in the way or anything. So how would you, I mean, it's great that you help the people that are, you know, coming like that our parents are with you, but like for someone that is new to this, that's not on a set with you, like what kind of advice would you give that parent when it comes to keeping their child safe?
Research, if you're on a set that is SAG, I would definitely visit SAG's website and look at all of the established things in place to make sure your child is safe. Look up labor laws in general for children, because that's also one. If you are not on a SAG set and you want to make sure that your child is absolutely given the breaks and things of that nature that they're supposed to have and not working past the hours they should work, you want to go and do your research on that, which is super important. If you're blessed to have a set teacher or studio teacher on set, they should be knowledgeable enough to be able to give you the rules that are set in place. And again, when you're setting that relationship with production, you're also doing that with the set teacher and the studio teacher. I think I mentioned earlier, being able to meet with them before you actually go to set and have a conversation with them about expectations. And they too, I mean, essentially they're there to make sure that your child, you know, and all of the rules are being followed. So being able to establish that with the teachers and the set/or studio teacher or welfare worker is important. I can't stress that enough. That relationship between you and them, you are essentially doing the same thing. You're there to protect and make sure that everything is going according to plan. So if there's something you may not know, you have a question about, that is a good one, but research would be my biggest one. SAG, AEA, whichever one your child is a part of, and or looking up the labor law so you're aware, because there's so much out there and sometimes you don't know. But if it's pertaining particularly to that production and you have a question, research it.
Great advice. Matt, do you want to go on to the next questions?
Yeah.
Would-
Hey, John. You know, as a producer, and you wear many hats, but as somebody who's constantly building schedules for all kinds of projects, both, you know, commercial, film, television, and union and non-union, what are some of the most important things you could share with, you know, everybody here when it comes to filming with child actors?
Well, I mean, I'd like to say there's a lot of common sense involved, but I also feel like there's not a lot of common sense in the world these days. So first and foremost, if I'm handed a script or a treatment or whatever the project at hand might be that calls for 30 children and it's all set at nighttime, and it's going to shoot during school days, you know, just a whole series of red flags are going to go up in terms of what is plausible, especially here where there's not a lot of union projects, be they film, TV, or commercial. It's just not something that's on a lot of people's radars in terms of taking for granted how many hours you might be able to work with a child depending on their age, and sort of what windows of time you are eligible to work with them. So you need to have somebody involved who's, at least for non-union productions, familiar with the state of Minnesota or whatever state you're in, familiar with the child labor laws of that jurisdiction. And then, as you mentioned, Matt, also, or Kathy mentioned, if you have one set of rules issued by a state, you have another set of rules issued by a union, if it is a SAG project, then you have a kind of a mashup of different rules that you have to navigate. But they're all going to play into scheduling, whether it's scheduling out like weeks, long-term run of a project, or it's even scheduling single days, where you may have to schedule workloads that involve children independent of how you're shooting the rest of a scene. You might have to come back and pick up or shoot shots that you've already covered parts of that scene, but you have to now cover it from the child's perspective. You just have to have like an utmost attention to detail in terms of prioritizing when those children are going to be on camera, knowing in advance, talking interdepartmentally, how long is it going to take to get them through the works or through the makeup chair, or, you know, God forbid you're going to spend 2 hours putting them through a bunch of special effects makeup, and then you get to maybe shoot with them for an hour, and then they need another hour and a half to get out of that special effects makeup. But it's not something that you can ever take for granted. And it's not something you can just wing in the last minute. I think the state of Minnesota currently, the Department of Labor has requests a 2-week turnaround period for their minor exemption, the permit application, if you want to work with the child outside of the regulated minimum hours. They're very good about approving those. They have some special accommodations for child actors in contrast to other areas of minor employment. But it is not a fast turnaround. They have gotten better over the years, but it's just not something you can expect to get turned around very quickly. It's a little bit of a black hole in terms of collaborating with that department. But you can't necessarily go ahead with schedule decisions unless you're approved to make certain schedule choices already by the Department of Labor. So, it's like a house of cards in terms of decision making, and one that certainly can't start late in the game. I can just say, like, a couple projects from my experiences, like, here we want 25 children, all that are like 3rd and 4th graders, and we're going to shoot with them all during school for 2 days, and we want them for 2 10-hour days, and we're going to shoot in 5 days. And on that job, I was the UPM, and now get all these permits approved by the state. And you're talking to parents on the phone late at night on Halloween while their kids are trick-or-treating, trying to turn around these permit applications and then rush them through the Department of Labor. Or you're handed a script where the lead actor is written to be a 14 or 15-year-old girl, and she's in every single scene of the movie. And it was never considered up until that point what the implications or what the overhead is going to be in terms of managing the availability of that child. Because it's not about, like it's been alluded to by others, you can't just bring them on and then work them for 10 hours straight without a break or just with their lunch break. Their day has to be, I like to think of it as a sub-schedule. You have to design a specific sort of workflow for the child in terms of when they have breaks, when they go to school, and they're just not going to always be there and be available. I think it's good also to reiterate what you said, Matt, that maybe going a little away from your question about scheduling, but for me, even if it's a non-union job, it's good to have an established set of rules that you're abiding by in terms of guideposts. Obviously, SAG is, the penultimate standard for what those ideal or best rules could be. But also, I think it comes down to a lot of clear communication with the key collaborators on any set, be that if it's a director, a producer, a DP, a UPM, the AD, where there always will be certain people who are pushing to do more. Like, oh, look, just do one more. We just got to do one more. And you might be already at the time. And then someone comes to talk to Betty and says, oh, hey, Betty, like, oh, we're kind of at our time already, can we just do a few more? Can we buy like another half an hour? Or, you have to have people that are established as like the gatekeepers to prevent going down those holes. Because they're always, if it's not a director, it's a producer, or it's a DP, and trying to sway people to fudge the rules a little bit. And if it's not defined in advance who those people are, then you're going to end up in you know, just a tumultuous situation where, like Betty alluded to, now you have maybe one parent that's upset, or you got a group of parents, and you know, you're going to be in a bad situation fast.
Well, and you brought up a good point too, is just, you know, we heard from Betty's side, but then, you know, what's your interface like with the parents as well? And say you are going over a little bit, you know, how do you approach a situation like that? Where you are looking at possibly losing a day if you don't get the shot that you need, and you know that's going to push you a little bit over. How do you approach that? You know?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's just about communication up front, and establishing, having one-on-one conversations with parents and or with the child or the parents, because parents are very often in those moments and or leading up to the set moments are fulfilling, like, sometimes these combined like roles of manager and agent and guardian, but like filling multiple roles. So starting conversations very early and keeping the conversation very fresh. So most importantly, they know what the expectations are when they're going to arrive and or come to set, in terms of what the day is structured like. You know, one interesting thing that I've seen multiple people learn multiple times here in our market is, when it comes to something like accounting or payroll, you know, very often, especially younger children, they'll have a trust set up for them as the payroll entity. And a handful of times where, you know, even I've been told, like, oh, you can just make the checks to me, the parent. And like, no, we can't do that. Like, you can't do that. But so even that is like a simple conversation that I've seen happen multiple times, where that wasn't established up front, didn't necessarily know even how like the child was going to be paid or compensated. Now there's certain ways to keep that in check earlier in advance, and I think it just comes down to communicating. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. No, I think it answered a
Little
few
bit.
questions. Yeah, it answered questions. No, I think it's really important to just, you know, hear from both sides too, because obviously communication is the main thing to have up front, and establishing the relationship before cameras even start with the blinking red light. And you know, I think it's also important to mention too that as the child actor is younger and younger, our time allotment for them on set is fewer and fewer hours. So that's where you have to get really crafty with the scheduling too, because I believe 0 to 6, you're only allowed, I believe 6 hours on set, and then you have to have 2 1-hour breaks. So you're really looking at a 4-hour day. Like, how do you schedule around something like that? That can be tricky if you're trying to shoot multiple things within a day, and then you have to take into consideration company moves, or, you know. So you brought it up, I think, Ray, at the beginning of, like, you know, it starts with the script too. You know, if you're a filmmaker and you have a project that you want to do with a lot of kids, like, think about these and do your research up front before you get into the meat of the project, because, you know, it's time and money when it comes to this kind of thing, and these rules are there and exist for a reason. So yeah, we're gonna move it along here. Thank you, John.
So Lucy, our set teacher, did I say your name correctly, Lucy?
Yes, Lucci's fine. Yes.
Okay. So what are some of the responsibilities that you have as a set teacher? And what is a set teacher? Just for the people on the call.
Okay, so the set teacher is more like the facilitator for the educational aspect of, you know, the educational piece while the minor is on, is at the place of employment. We do not design like the curriculum. We administer or we aid in, their curriculum that they get from their home school, whether it's a traditional school setting or many of my students or many of my kids, they were like homeschool. So we are there to assist. Most of the times, when you have like, I would say from ages 9 and up, they are very, very independent. So you're just there to make sure that they're doing their schoolwork, and it's not homework that they're doing the work that they would have done if they actually attended their regular school. Now, as a SET teacher, you have to have like, you just can't, you have to have credentials, and it varies state to state. For the most part, reciprocity does exist, but California is like the most restrictive policy where you have to have both an elementary and a high school certificate in a certain subject in order to help any student from ages from grades kindergarten all the way up to the 12th grade. So we serve like as a tutor / facilitator, and I mean, we're there to assist.
Right on. So how, like, talk to us about like what a typical day is for you then. Like you get to set, have you done any work ahead of time, like in talking with the parent or the production, or what is like your pre-production when you're on a project, and then how does a typical day run for you?
Yes, there's a lot of planning involved. As the gentleman before me stated, like it all depends on what the end goal is and depends on the type of script that you have. Well, I'm in Illinois. I'm based out of Chicago, so for the most part, I'm really known, and I'm that type of no nonsense type. The students are my, they're my responsibility, so a typical day would be, okay, how many hours is this child going to work on set? What's the game plan? What are the rules? Because in certain states, they can only school for a certain amount of time. They can't school past a certain time. I think in Illinois it's 4 p.m. If it's if you're in California, it's 7 for certain grades. And so we have a plan, and we talk to the ADs. We talk to sometimes we have to talk to the parents, because as Betty said earlier, the psychological part of being a child actor is, it's a lot. It's a lot, whether you have a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, or if you have a 17-year-old. So a typical day would be, sometimes the kids, they come to set, they go right into the wardrobe, hair and makeup, and they go straight to set to work. And then they get their schooling like in piecemeals, in pieces, like 20 minutes at a time. Sometimes it's an entire hour. And sometimes I'm schooling a kid for 5 hours. Those are our field trip days, by the way, because sitting in one room for 5 hours, no good can come from that. And then also be expected to go on set. So it all depends, it's a crazy life that I have when it comes to going on set. So it can be schooling the kid for 20 minutes a day. Schooling them in 20-minute blocks each time. And it could be schooling them for hours at a time. But the minimum amount of hours that they have to get every day is 3 hours a day, at least in many of the states that I work in.
Mm-hmm. And then how do you handle like an overnight shoot when the timing is not within the hours of schooling allowed for the state?
Well, that's not negotiable. So, for example, in Illinois, if the schooling is, and they're like, we don't make concessions, but if they need to use a minor past the school hours, they will bring them in early, you know, or sometimes a student already went to school that day, which means that they have even less time to deal with that particular student to work with. Or sometimes we bank hours, you know, so the 3-hour minimum turns into 1 hour, you know, the mandatory 1 hour. That's if they have banking hours, you know, from a previous day. So I don't want to say that we negotiate, but we make a plan where it's legal and it's within the realms of the rules that's set forth by each particular state.
Mm-hmm. And so what if the kid, you alluded to the field trip day, like what if the kid is just like not in a mental state to be in school because they're tired, they're, you know, like they're getting pulled out every 20 minutes to be on set, they can't focus. Like how as a set teacher do you handle the fatigue and just the kids' mental load and stress?
So that's the other side, at least working, you know, sometimes I serve as a welfare worker, you know, for the mental state, physical and mental state of the child. So there have been a couple of times when I had to step in to let them know like this particular minor was not ready. And we know that this industry is a business, and while they're minors, they see the students, they see the kids as a business, you know, and the parents, you know, what Betty said, the parents, you know, they want to have that happy medium where, you know, that the child is protected and they're also, you know, they're satisfying the production company. So that's when I step in. I'm the bad person, and I don't mind being the bad person at all, you know, and I think that's why I'm always called back, because I would make sure like I keep everyone honest. So I do step in, and it got to one point once I had one minor where I can tell something was wrong, and they wanted to make their parent happy, they wanted to make production happy, and I'm like, nah, no. And I said that this minor needed some extra time, and at the end she actually thanked me, because you know she actually thanked me because it's like it's you know they're making they have to act like an adult, you know, but they're still a child. So I'm the bad guy. I won't say half the time, but I'm respected. And, you know, that's it. You know, I'm the voice for the kid, for the child,
Mm-hmm.
and the parents sometimes.
That's great. You know, as an AD, like, and before I became an AD, I was, you know, like a first team PA, and I, you know, was working with the kids and you know, all the actors. Uh, and I remember on one particular movie, it was like all kids. It was a camp movie. We were all staying there. It was in Connecticut. So where it was like a sleepaway camp for real for the crew and the cast and the parents. And I mean, it was a nightmare because it was like the kids were in every single scene, and they also had to go to school, right? And like the I as a first team PA, not having a lot of power on set, you know, and but having to be like the go between production, the demands of production, and then also dealing with the parents and the set teacher. Like I was asked to like fudge things and lie and do, you know, like change the G so it reflects what it's supposed to, but not the reality of um the situation. And I just wonder, to all of you guys, like mom, parent, set teacher, and production, like what do you do when this comes up? And I know it's all situational, you know, but
I can answer, you know, in two folds, you know, like some, you know, like a lot of, I always say this, there's policy and then there's practice.
Mhm.
Policy will get you your next check. Practice can get you your last check, you know. So I state the rules. I'm a mathematician. So it's like hot or cold, black or white. There's barely any gray areas with me. So I state the rules, you know, the rules are there for a reason. You know, there's some type of precedence that's out there why they have rules. But I also know that, okay, sometimes there's traffic, there's some type of mitigating circumstances that are involved. But I feel like when you go into practice, good or bad practices, then it becomes a continuum, you know. So people know me, I'm a stickler. I'm a policy type of person. I mean, it's a good and bad thing, I guess, but that's just me. And I always premise it with that slogan, with the next check versus the final check.
Mhm.
And step in right there too and add to it. Lucci's really good at being able to state what it is. And as a parent, sometimes you do get production who comes to you, as you know, what was stated before, and asks, can they stay a little longer? And I'm really good at no, unless my daughter is having a great time. I get that, oh, you need an extra 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I know what it's supposed to be. And listen, if she's like doing choreography that she's really into, by all means. When she's doing what she loves, I don't want to be the one to be like hammer down. But if I can see she's exhausted, I do not care what production says. She is ready to go. And I can tell that it's wearing on her and my foot is down. And I don't do the fudging of paperwork. I'm not that parent. I am not. It is what it is. If it is in Danielle's best interest, you will see me say, sure. I mean, she wants to stay. She's begging me at this point. Danielle will do that sometimes. Please do it because you're enjoying yourself. But outside of that, it's an absolute no for me. I don't care if they need an extra 10, it's going to set them back. It might set my daughter back mentally. I am not doing that. It's her first and then everything else.
Well, and how do you prepare your child for making those decisions too? When, how do you prep them? Because obviously, they want to please the production, right? I mean, that's all of our natural response. We want to do what's best for the production. We don't want to be the pin that's holding everything back. But how do you prep your child for making those decisions and being able to speak their mind to you and to the producer of just like, no, I'm not here anymore. I'm gone. I'm back at home in bed. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So our conversations definitely happen well before we hit set. Danielle is very aware that I am here to advocate for her. And if she hears me say something as a no and a yes, she understands that that is in her best interest, regardless of the situation. We are not there to please. She's there to do her job and to have a good time as well. Because at the end of the day, she is a child. She's in an adult setting. That's very true. I mean, she's older now, so, 16, 17-year-old her is more mature. So she does have that aspect of being able to say, okay, I can stay a little longer. I can understand this, whatever it may be. But when Danielle was 13, 12, 10, me and her established that relationship. At the end of the day, I'm mom, and I'm not going to say and do anything that is not in your best interest. So if you hear me say, it is to protect you. She understood that. Even in situations where she wanted more, or whatever it may be, she knew that my word was final because I was there to protect her. Never on the opposite end of things, though. I would never push her, so production is not met. That's non-negotiable again for me. I'm not going to push her to do something if it's upsetting her. Now, we've been in situations, I'll give an example of like her hair. Her hair, Danielle being a Black girl, it has been a topic on set where there was like she was in pain. And she expressed that while we were there. She started crying, and I immediately shut things down, called the head of hair, and had a conversation with her to let her know that going forward, we have to establish something else because the constant tugging and pulling it hurts. It is upsetting her. Her scalp was inflamed, and immediately we had a plan of action. It was not negotiable. Yes, of course, they like I don't know if you guys, outside of who's on the call and on the panel, have experienced having to shoot scenes for days, for a week and a half or two. And so you're wearing the same style and they're changing you from one style to the next. That's a whole lot. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is, especially on Black Scalp. And so I had to step in. I did not want her in pain, and the pain wasn't momentary, it was ongoing. My job is to make sure that she feels safe, she feels good, she can perform to the best of her ability, with her feeling like she can perform at her best and feel her best. And that was a moment where I was like, yeah, it's not negotiable. We have to figure out a different plan.
Great.
So Betty, with that, like, and you kind of answered this, but just to be really explicit with it, like, how do you keep, as a parent, like, how do you help keep your kids mentally healthy and safe on set?
I think a lot of it happens offset. It's a fine balance of real life, social, family, all of that, and work. It really is this line that you have to make sure to set. And you know, sometimes it feels like you're maybe spoiling your child. Like for mine, for sure, she's a social butterfly. She wants to do everything social. And most parents would be like, you let her do everything. I do. I absolutely do, because I know for her, she needs that good balance of friendship and life and family, as well as work. So when Danielle is working full time, I try as much as I can to fill her weekends with activities, with people, with experiences, to make sure that she's having a good balance of work and life. And even on set, I mean, she loves to sing and dance and do all of the things. And those moments that she have breaks, she absolutely uses them and utilizes them to do TikToks or whatever it may be. So it's a good balance of life and work that keep her grounded when she is working and when she's offset. I hope I answered it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, that was great. I do have I want to jump into a few questions here because we did get quite a few.
Can I just throw one thing out there, Matt?
Absolutely, John.
That it would just be great if we had more Lucci's and more Bettys in the world, because I've the weird thing that I've experienced is parents who are not Betty, and parents who are the ones who are almost pushing the child to do more when more isn't going to be good. And they've worked their limit and they're maybe tired or they're maybe fatigued mentally. And then you actually find yourself in the awkward position of like negotiating a parent back, or trying to tell them that no, you're done for the day. It seems like you should be done for the day. But I think again, it just all comes down to expectations. And to go back to your scheduling question, it's like the thing that's fascinating is it's not just about like the welfare worker, the teacher, the AD, the producer, because when you have to have something set and ready to pop for a young, especially a younger child, that means the whole crew has to be on the same page in terms of the priority of the moment and the priority of the days. You can't just willy-nilly schedule in and then we're going to do the kids coverage later. No, because that might require a ton of work that everybody needs to proactively be thinking about to be ready for the kid when they walk on. You can't have a child walk on and, oh, now we're going to do another 30 minutes of lighting. It's like, so there's got to be a different cadence that allows for the experience to be good. Like Betty was saying, like, oh, if it's a good day, if it's a good experience, and if Danielle's in a great mood and having fun, that's a very different feeling in terms of how you can negotiate a situation versus everybody's just running around with their heads cut off, trying to like get some last little thing accomplished. And it just would feel like the production is not prepared for this.
Well, yeah, and you bring up a good point too, just of like, we've all been in the scenario where it's a bit of a chaotic set, and then suddenly you have a 7-year-old child come to the chaos, and like, how do you manage that chaos? How do you, oh wow. Speaking of
Yeah,
chaos.
it just got super dramatic over here.
But it is, I'm glad you brought that up, because you do have to mentally prepare the entire crew for this to happen, and you have to be on point and ready to go because you have such a limited amount of time. But, do you have those in pre-production meetings? Do you talk about those in safety meetings at the beginning of your day? Just to get the crew sort of mentally prepared for that moment when we do have this child coming to set and we only have a certain amount of time that we can use them.
You absolutely should. Yeah, if you're not doing those things, then you're already messing up, I would say.
Yeah, I think the on the parent side of things, I've been on set where I can clearly see no one has worked with kids before, and I have to come in as and two, thank goodness for, like you said, the Lucci's of the world. Lucci is special. She is a special breed because we've worked with many teachers, and sometimes as a parent, you are educating the set teacher or welfare worker of how things should go. And that's just an interesting place to be. It's part of the reason, going back to what I said earlier, research, know exactly what should happen and set those expectations in the beginning, because you might get into a place where no one is really familiar. That happens more than not, where a lot of the crew, AD, whoever it may not really understand what it is. And if your child is the only child on set and they don't really know what it looks like, then that's a moment of education, right? You're educating them, hence the conversation before, being able to establish those things. It should be that way, but we're not there yet. I would say we're not there yet.
And I would say that is absolutely a challenge for our markets, our sort of regional markets and our big market here in the Twin Cities or in Minnesota, because there are not, I mean, it'll blow your mind, Lucci, but like the number of times on an annual basis that somebody texts me, so it's like, are there any set teachers in town? Like, who can we call? Is there, like, I don't even know, I've got like a couple names of people, but I haven't worked with them in that capacity for years. So it's a complicated thing here, because then every time you do it, it's a matter of re-educating and re-educating yourself a little bit, because it's not a common workforce element for us here. But then you're trying to educate someone who maybe hasn't done this, and that's very challenging, because then you feel like you're becoming the advocate to put them in the best position to succeed. So maybe what we need to do is have Lucci come up here and do a teacher training session, a welfare teacher training session, just to get a couple reliable people on the map.
I've been planting the seeds with her.
I would say this. I was telling Matt that my very first set teacher, studio teacher job was Minnesota. It was Super Bowl 2018.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
so it was in Minnesota. So that's where I started. I was in Walmart in Chicago. I got a call and I was pushing my cart, and I was so excited that I pushed the cart to my car, forgot to pay for the stuff, and just pushed the cart right back in the store and got on the plane that evening. So yeah, it was Super Bowl 2018. Yeah, it was in Minnesota.
Right on.
I was gonna say, I hope that you have the reciprocity is flowing through Illinois and Minnesota. We'll have to get you on some jobs up here.
Well, I'm always available. I'm only like what 8 hours away. Like I'm going to Arkansas tomorrow for a job. So I fly all over. I'm all over the place half the time. So
Awesome.
So much, and it's not even like Lucci knows it. I love her to death. Danielle's at an age where she doesn't, we can't use Lucci, but she is one of the best. She does not, she understands her role as a welfare worker, set teacher, studio teacher. She fully understands that she is not working for production, she's working with production. And I think that is like the biggest thing is when you go on set and you're talking to someone who is supposed to be there for the child, and the thought is that they're working for production. As a parent, it's really hard because you're like, oh, this person is telling me the right stuff. When you don't know, you think that it's in your best interest. It's really, really important to educate yourself. I can't scream that enough because not everybody is a Lucci. Lucci is well-versed in everything, and she understands her role as the teacher and welfare worker. She fully understands that. Me, myself, I understand my role as a parent, and I know that at the end of the day, I have the autonomy to make sure that Danielle is safe, that my child is safe. Even if Lucci didn't know, even if John doesn't know, I know, and I'm the first line of defense. It's really important as a parent to understand that. It's wonderful to have Lucci's on set. It's wonderful to have a John who makes it a point to understand what his role is on the production side for a kid, but you are not always going to, more times than not, you will walk into a situation where you don't have Lucci's and John. So as a parent, it's important to be the first line of defense for your child and make sure that you're keeping them safe. And I tell Danielle all the time, I want us to be liked, and you will always be liked, but I don't have to be liked because that's not my job. I am not here to be liked. I'm here to make sure that you are good, you're healthy, you're safe. So I think that's the biggest takeaway a parent can take. Don't worry about if, oh, my child's not going to get the next job. They will. They will. Your child's talent speaks for itself. Danielle works, and when she works, she's good. Her talent speaks for itself. I'm not a menace. I am by no means would I say I'm a menace, but I'm not scared to make sure that she is great. I really do not care how anyone sees it. I don't care. I am here to make sure she is feeling good. And I'm not rude about it. At least I don't think I am. I don't think I'm rude about it, but I am firm. I'm very firm.
Yeah, I mean, as a parent, I think if you're advocating for your child's health and well-being and you don't get hired back from that company, it's probably not a company I would want to work for anyway. So that's the thing too, is we can't get hung up on this will they work again sort of mentality. It's setting a precedent for the next jobs, the next productions that come to town. And that's why, we have these. Is like, no, speak up. If you feel like something isn't right, you have the responsibility to speak up for it. So, well, I want to go into a few questions here. We do have several from the audience, and Bill has a couple statements, and there's one question about how long are permits good for? How many days max? And do you need permits for each show in Minnesota? John, do you know about that at all?
Like labor department permits?
Yes.
When you submit them, so you submit an application for a specific exemption or set of exemptions, meaning you're wanting the child to work outside of the normal hours that are mandated for their age group. You have to submit that application for the exact days and the exact schedule in which you'll be shooting. It's not an open-ended or endless sort of thing. You have to know what your scheduled design is when you submit the application.
And then there's also a question from Bill, are Coogan accounts mandatory? And for those that don't know what the Coogan Act is and Coogan accounts. Coogan accounts are trusts that are set aside. I think it's 15% of the pay must go towards a trust of some sort. I don't have the answer to that question, at least from Minnesota. It's actually the first that I've come across if they were mandatory or not, but I would imagine in larger markets, maybe. Kathy, do you know anything about that?
So no, there is not a Coogan law in Minnesota. You will, however, see it on occasion when like a bigger budget AMPTP company, if they were to come to Minnesota, because they already have their accounting system set up for minors to have 15% taken out, they will require the minor to get a blocked trust account to set aside that 15% if you want to be employed on that production. So even though it's not the law, the production has the right to make that part of their, condition of employment. But yeah, no, Minnesota does not have anything that's a Coogan law concept.
There's a couple other questions here, a few for Betty. Can you describe a scenario where you feel like you've needed to step in to advocate or remove your child from set?
Yeah, I can. A pretty simple one would be a bathroom break. Sometimes there are PAs who do not understand something that simple. And I've had to yank Danielle offset because she has requested to use the bathroom twice and she was ignored and had a PA tell her after this shot. And I'm like, nope, she's going now. She is doing the dance and that's not okay. Had to have the conversation with production and say, that's a basic human right. She needs to go. So that seems very simple, but she's been tried in that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a question from Tyler. If a parent requests to stay at base camp while their kid, let's say 17 years old, goes to set and a monitor won't reach them, is that okay? Or do we have to go to set with the child?
I can answer that. The parent needs to go to set with the child. And that's both obviously for the protection of the child, but production should want the parent there as well, just so that nobody has any question about anything that may or may not have happened. So the parent should be accompanying that child to set.
And what are the max hours required for school and max hours allowed on set for each age range? And I think, Kathy, if you were able to break that down maybe a little bit.
Schooling is 3 hours per day for children of all ages.
But you can bank some of those hours, right?
Banking is not in our contract. It is something that we allow productions to do, and we have a whole formula for how that works. But like I said, it's not in our contract, so we don't have to allow that.
Okay, and here's another question for Betty. For the newer parents out there, how do you help the parent deal with, or let me start again. For newer parents out there, how do you help how do you recommend that you help their child deal with rejection and keep their spirits up and mentally safe? So, okay, I'll do this whole thing again. Rewind.
Yep.
For the newer parents out there, based on your experience, how do you keep your child safe and her spirits up, mentally safe when they're dealing with rejection?
Yeah. In terms of rejection, which it's inevitable, there's no child who doesn't go through it in this industry. it really is just always looking forward after you've done something, you know. It's what, that's a thing, that's a fine line. Okay, I'm gonna explain how Danielle deals with it and how I deal with it with my daughter. The easier stuff, meaning she does an audition, we may not hear back. She knows once she does it, we let it go. We just hope for a callback, but if we don't hear anything, then clearly they've moved on. So you do it and you're done. When Danielle gets to like a testing, so testing would be you're down to like 3 other actors. It's gonna go to one of you 3, and it didn't go to her. It really is I tell her, I say, you're so close. You're very close. That moment is coming, but also I'm excited that you didn't get it. And I know parents would be like, you're excited that she didn't get it? Yes, because I only want Danielle to get what's meant for her. And that is the attitude and the kind of thinking that I put in her mind. If you didn't get it, it's because you weren't supposed to get it. It was meant for whoever got it. Outside of that, and we cheer them on because a lot of times it may be her friends. That has happened twice this year. It's happened twice this year where Danielle was what she thought was going to be the finish line. And she was done for her, and her friend got it, and we are excited for them because it was meant for them and not for her. So of course she wanted it really, really bad, but it doesn't matter what you want, it's what is meant for you. So she's really good at cheering her friends on. She's really good at cheering people whoever it may be on. And I can use the series that she was on last, when we were down to the finish line, she was like, I hope if it's not me, I hope if it's me, the other girls get some type of role on the show because we worked really hard to get here. And that's the kind of attitude I want her to have. It has nothing to do with, I failed. It's not a failure. It is not a failure. So it's really just keeping a very healthy mindset and making sure that your child knows that everybody is different, but whatever they're destined to have and what they're destined to get, they will get. As long as they're putting in I always say you did your 100%. And as long as your 100 was given, it's out of your hands. It's whatever they're looking for.
I know who I'm calling next time I get a rejection. So John and Carrie too, you guys speak into this as a first AD. What is the process when making an initial schedule on how to schedule minors? Do you like to schedule all of their scenes at the beginning of the day, then do class, or vice versa?
That's like, it's kind of like, oh, you're going to rebuild a Jenga tower in terms of figuring out how it's all going to come together based on specific location days. But obviously, if you're at a location for a single day, you're just going to try to, depending on what the coverage is for the child, you're going to try to wedge it in wherever you can strategically to back up their scenes and concentrate their scenes, limiting setup time, or they go to school when there's a bunch of setup time happening, but certainly compressing the workload that involves the child and dressing around that, whatever other work there may be. I'll say what I don't want to feel like I'm turning it into a thing about set teaching or studio teaching, but I just want to say that on one particular job that I'm thinking of, the energy what kept the kids energized was a very dynamic, interactive, fun, like teaching environment that like everyone, including the kids, were looking forward to the moment that they did their work. Good job, they did their work, but then they got to go to the school area that we had built, and that was something that energized them. But I say that specifically, and I've been guilty of this too, because it's such a removed concept from our market here. It's something that we need to strive to improve on, the value of that relationship as like a collaborator, being the set teacher, one that can bring advantages to the experience for the young performers. I don't know, Tyler, if that answered Tyler's question though, but it's a hard thing to put a blanket sort of statement on in terms of a scheduling approach. I don't know, Carrie, what do you think?
I mean, I think my approach has been to like spread it out as much as you can, so there's a combination of the set work and the school work. You know, as a second AD, I remember like one thing that was super helpful for first ADs is to say, ask the question when the child is released from set, do they have time to go to school? Right? Like, and it's because usually they do. They can get some time in, and like you said, when you have a good set teacher, they're happy to go there because they're going to make it fun and exciting, and it's going to be fresh. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I'll bring kids in a little early so they can get some school in before they start their set work, and then they go back. It all is situational and depends. But
But
And what,
importantly, to like make it feel like part of their day.
yeah,
I'd say like that, there's so much value in that, and not extending their day, but like making it part of their day that they're enthusiastic about, and not like, oh, I don't want to go to school.
that's when they hit 13, 14, right? And what about non-school age children, like under 5, from 2 to 4? What do we do with their days? How do we keep them engaged? How do we, what's the scheduling like for that too?
And like something with a big role where it's a reoccurring character, or where you're bringing in a pool of people that could be like, we're bringing in 3 babies. There's 1 baby in the story, but the 3 babies might get swapped out because you obviously it's hard to work with babies. And babies, of course, wouldn't also be in school, only the real sophisticated ones. But Matt,
I'm
you
just
might
thinking
have
like
to ask
older, I think like toddler age, so 3-year-olds, they're not required to go to school, right? But we have to have the break times available. And what are we doing with their very limited schedules that we have? How are we doing break times? I think maybe it's just the same question I'm asking that Tyler asked, just in a different way of phrasing it around the ages, because we think school and that's 5 and above, and that's how we schedule. But we also have to schedule break times, and what are we doing during those break times for, toddler age children?
I mean, in my experience, it's more about play. It's more about constructive play and removing them from the set environment to well, I don't want to say a safe environment, but removing them from the set environment and getting their mind in more of a play atmosphere with people that are safeguarding them, whether that's a welfare worker and or parents, or what other form of a guardian might be there. Because the stimulus of being on set for a toddler is quickly a spiking course of drama unto itself. I don't know, Lucci, have you worked much in a welfare capacity with youngins?
Yeah, they think I'm like the oversized youngin with them. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
like when I work in a welfare capacity, like I have like with me, it's an experience, no matter what age you are. So I have like just a toolbox of a lot of games, books, gadgets, and Yeah, books. So, I keep them occupied, or again, depending on which state you're in, they're with their parents, so that's like a bathroom break, as Betty said, or time to go to to Crafty, or they're playing with other kids. But as you said, the key thing is to get them away from set. They're off camera and they're like on their own, rest and recreation on their own with the guardian.
And there is that, some may know him, a local guy named Brian Page, who has for many years done a lot of work, especially with the big target jobs that employ tons of toddlers and babies. And I think, like you said, he makes it a very fun experience for those young kids in terms of redirecting, and getting them away from the action when they don't need to be a part of it.
Yep.
There was another thing I wanted to touch on that Bill had brought up. And I think this is just a general statement, and I absolutely agree, is that many productions don't always follow the rules around having separate bathrooms, and that bathrooms are not technically changing rooms or dressing rooms, and that we should, whether you're a no budget or low budget project, you should always think about separate dressing rooms, not bathrooms, for each gender and child actor. So the statement he sent to me, and I thought maybe I'd just share that with everybody.
I also want people to know that Kathy put her contact information in the chat and extended her email and phone number to people that have questions or want to learn more in general with how to work with minors from a SAG-AFTRA perspective. And that is for real. Like 20 years ago, she was taking calls from people, from projects that I was working on in film school and stuff like that, and she would take those calls. And definitely, if you have a question, it's better to ask it than to try to figure it out or ignore it, right? So she is a great resource for that, for sure.
And I just put up a link for it's kind of like frequently asked questions, and there's a whole bunch of different links in this website that'll bring you to labor laws and Minnesota state laws. There's also an article I'm going to pop up here too for anybody interested in knowing just kind of the history of why some of these rules and regulations exist. Bill had brought up the Coogan accounts, and Jackie Coogan was a child actor from way back, one of the first child actors, and you can read a lot about why they came up with that law and that the regulations that go along with it, because there are many reasons why a lot of these labor laws exist around child actors, and that's because studios abused them heavily in the early heyday of filmmaking. So it's an interesting read if anybody's curious to check that out. But it doesn't look like we have any other questions. I'll kind of throw it out there one last time. If you do have a question, throw it up in the chat. Otherwise,
I
yeah.
do. So I know that each state is different, but how, if someone was interested in becoming a set teacher, studio teacher, what would you recommend they do? Like first of all, obviously they have to be a licensed teacher, right?
Yeah. I think it's all, my experience, it's been like word of mouth, or at best contact the department of like the film office for, the particular state to see about how going about it. Maybe they might direct you to that particular local union. But I don't want to say cornered into studio teaching. I actually ran away from teaching. And then I started working in the production office, and then they found that I was a teacher. And so I'm right back to teaching again. So it's word of mouth. All of my jobs have been word of mouth, or like a parent would say, you got to get this person. So it's like, how did you get my number? It's word of mouth. Contact the film office. The film office should have the union. And if it's not a big, if it's not a big entity in that particular state, I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry, Children in Film, that's an agency. And also On Location Education, who's located in New York. That's also an agency. And both of those, Children in Film more so focuses on like California studio teachers, which I'm also a California studio teacher, but On Location Education will send you everywhere, you know, on a boat, on Broadway and everything. So those are actually two starting points to get your foot in the door. And then like you being an AD, you go and work on another project, you'll say, oh, we had this one lady named Lucci, this one teacher who was Lucci, see if she's available. So then that's how you kind of trickle into the union jobs as well, you know, later on in life.
Right on.
Thanks, whoever just posted that. Yeah. Thanks, John.
Great.
And I'll just say maybe Brian, wait a minute, Brian. Yeah, Brian, who said in the chat that he's been a set teacher on a few sets, created a log aligned with child labor laws to help keep track of schooling hours, work hours, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe Brian's a guy that some of us can poke, you know, for future needs.
Yeah, my name is Brian Moores. I've worked as a set teacher just on a couple productions, and yeah, I used that log. I think it was aligned more with California state laws. But I know I worked with Matt on Cash for Gold, and that's a log we looked at. And when we wanted to see how long a child was, you know, working or had work hours, school hours, I think Matt, you actually went and looked at it like, oh yeah, we got a few more left or whatever, and we used that one on Cash for Gold. So I just figured I'd put that out there. And I'm, you know, a set teacher up here. I've been working on some productions here and there. So, and I'm a teacher in Duluth, Minnesota right now. So, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, Brian was great on the set of Cash for Gold. It was that was definitely I think our main actor was 5. So we had it was always a interesting day, you know, to try to get all that stuff shot and shooting out of location, which made it even more interesting. So
All right, well, we are at time. I want to you know, acknowledge that and everyone's time. There are, like, again, Kathy put her information in the chat if there are further questions, or if there are other questions, you can direct them to Matt and I, and we can try to find out the answers if we don't know them already. But I want to thank our panelists, if everyone can help me with that. This is a wealth of knowledge that we were given, and really important real life experiences. So thank you very much for your time and your expertise.
Yep, you're welcome.
yes, thank you so much,
Everybody,
guys.
thank
I
you.
really appreciate all your time. And you know, if any of the audience have questions directly for some of the panelists, just shoot me or Carrie an email, and we'll make sure to connect the dots if we need further conversation, or you just want to figure out how to be a set teacher or learn about scheduling. I'll send them all to John.
It'll take me a month to get back to you.
We are going to send out a little survey to the people that were a part of this conversation. If you would please take the time to do it, it would be really helpful for us in our future panels that we or workshops that we put together. So look out for that.
Yeah, and if there's any specific topic that you guys are interested in learning more about too, please throw that in there in the notes part of it, or just suggestions, because you know we do these about every other month, but we could do more. So just let us know. And
Thanks,
thank you all
everybody.
so much.
Thank you.